cool places. I feel like I should maybe move somewhere. We'll see. Okay, I think we can get started on the recipe. So pumpkin bread, for those of you who don't know what it is, if you're maybe not from the US where it's not as popular, it is basically a dessert made with canned pumpkin, though you can use fresh, like home cooked pumpkin if you want, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. It's got a bunch of spices and flour and sugar, and it's baked in a loaf pan like this. We'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, so the first step is, okay, this is a vegan pumpkin bread. Obviously I'm vegan, this is a vegan channel. We have to come up with an egg substitute. So usually eggs are used in pumpkin bread and most baked goods to add structure, to add moisture, and a little bit of richness. So what I use in this recipe, and a lot of my recipes, is aquafaba. That is just the liquid from a can of chickpeas. I used some the other day, so I already have some. And while it might look like a sample that you would give to the doctor, it is not. It is just the liquid from a can of chickpeas. I like to buy unsalted chickpeas so that I'm not adding additional salt. If you can't find unsalted chickpeas, that's fine. Just use less salt in the recipe, which I'll add later. So the full printable recipe with the exact measurements is linked in the video description box if you want to follow along. I'll try to name what I'm using, how much I'm using of it, but if I forget, you can always reference the recipe. So the first step I'm going to do is measure out our aquafaba. This is already measured out. This is 90 milliliters or 3 ounces, a quarter cup, and 2 tablespoons. Yes, I do have all these things memorized in my head. That's just how my brain works. You do this long enough. And what we're going to do for the aquafaba is we're going to whip it just with an electric mixer for maybe 30-45 seconds until it gets foamy. And let me do that and I'll explain why. So this looks good for our aquafaba consistency. And for reference, usually 3 tablespoons of aquafaba is about 1 egg. Obviously there's medium eggs, large eggs, etc., but that's a general rule. And the reason I whip it is because it adds this lightness and this airiness to vegan baked goods, which if you're familiar with a lot of standard vegan baked goods, they can be dry, they can be dense. And aquafaba, instead of a different egg substitute, say flax eggs or bananas, really adds that nice lift and lightness and airiness, which I think is so lovely in vegan baking. And that is why it is my preferred egg substitute in a lot of recipes, particularly cakes and quick breads like this. So we're going to use pumpkin in a bit, but I'm going to put it to the side for now. We're going to set this aside. And what do we need next? We are going to do our milk. So a lot of traditional baked goods use buttermilk. Buttermilk's not vegan, obviously, it's made with dairy. A common vegan substitute is to mix a plant-based milk with some apple cider vinegar, sometimes lemon juice, and the acidity will kind of tenderize the baked good, and it will also add a very subtle tang that buttermilk traditionally provides. So this is a really small amount. This is just a quarter cup or 60 milliliters of milk. I like oat milk in baking. I think it helps baked goods brown better. This is a creamy version, so you're gonna get a little bit extra richness. Because it's such a small amount though, I feel like any plant milk will work. Soy milk or almond milk is probably fine too. And then I just add a tablespoon of vinegar to this. Get my trusty measuring spoon out. And if you don't have apple cider vinegar, again, lemon juice would be just fine. And that's a tablespoon of the vinegar. And a little spoon to mix it all up. If you were using soy milk, this would curdle like immediately because of the proteins in soy milk. Oat milk doesn't really have the same effect, but it still has that nice tang and it still produces the results we're looking for. I'm gonna put this back in the fridge. Oh, what does vinegar do? Okay, so the vinegar is very acidic, so it helps to mimic the tang from buttermilk. If you have ever had buttermilk, it is tangy and it is also rich. And so the vinegar helps mimic that, and then in turn, it helps tenderize the baked good. It also interacts with the baking soda and kind of produces a greater rise and more lift in the cake while it's baking. So it's like science baking stuff. I encourage you to like Google more if you're interested in that. But I like to use vegan buttermilk a lot in my recipes. All right, next step. I lost the screen, by the way. There's nothing on there, it's just a computer. So next up, we are going to start on our liquid ingredients. We've already started on them, but we're gonna now start to combine them. First, we need some sugar. This is brown sugar. By the way, when I was on vacation, my lovely assistant Hannah redid our entire pantry, and she put everything in jars with labels, and it's like the best feeling ever. So thanks, Hannah, wherever you are. So brown sugar is the yogurt. I think I saw someone write yogurt. Would vegan yogurt, like homemade soy yogurt, be a good buttermilk sub? Possibly. Yogurt is going to be thicker, so it would depend on the rest of the ratios of the recipe that you're making. But I do like using vegan yogurt sometimes in baking. It does add a nice tang and a little bit of creaminess. But baking is kind of a science, and so, you know, I can't guarantee that if you use it in, say, this recipe, it'll work the same way. Okay, so back to the sugar. I like using brown sugar instead of like white cane sugar because it adds that kind of caramelly, molassesy flavor, which is really, really nice in pumpkin bread. I'm using organic brown sugar. For those of you who are not familiar, very unfortunate in the US, most refined sugars are made with animal bone char to refine it. It's terrible. I don't understand why we need to do that, but that is why I buy organic sugars, because at least in the US, that means you're not allowed, like manufacturers, sugar producers are not allowed to refine the sugar with animal products. And that's why I use organic. And another benefit is that with brown sugar, you know how it clumps up and gets really hard? It doesn't really do that with organic sugar, so that's nice. And I'm just using my measuring scale, so I don't have to use measuring cups. This is my preferred way to measure everything for baking, for regular cooking. I don't like using measuring cups. I think this is more accurate. So if you don't already have a scale, you can get a pretty inexpensive one at a cooking store or online, and they really make a big difference, I think. So let's measure this out. There we go, that's enough. This is about a heaping cup, 170 grams. Again, you can find the full measurements in that recipe. And now we're gonna add some oil. This is just a neutral flavored sunflower seed oil. Any neutral flavored oil will be fine. Grapeseed oil, canola oil, vegetable oil. If you wanted to substitute with olive oil, that would be fine, but I would use like a light tasting olive oil so you don't really want it to taste like olive oil. Coconut oil you could use if you wanted, but make sure that your milk and anything else that's cold is at room temperature, because it will seize up. The coconut oil will go back to room temperature if it mixes with cold ingredients. All right, this is 1/3 of a cup or 75 grams. Are there any questions? I can't see them now. And we're just gonna start mixing it with our mixer. Whoop! It's a clump, but it's not hard. You can just like break it up with your hands. That's again why I like organic sugar in addition to it being vegan. Having a few more clumps than anticipated. Just helped it along with a little spatula. Break up those clumps. And I'm just using like a medium speed is fine. I hate when I get my workspace messy. I know it's like not realistic to not have mess, but. Okay, one more mix and we should be good. All right, so this is our brown sugar and oil. If you're wondering if you can substitute coconut sugar, I think so. I have not tried it. Coconut sugar is usually a decent substitute for brown sugar. It is a bit drier. Brown sugar is has more moisture. But for this bread, it's pretty moist as is. I know that's not everyone's favorite word, but it has quite a bit of moisture, so I feel like coconut sugar would be okay if that's something you're interested in using. All right, now we are going to fold in that whipped aquafaba we just made. Ooh, I love that sound. Let's get it all out with the spatula. Okay, give it another mix. All right, that looks nice. You have any questions so far? Nope. What? I can't see anything.
Oh, you can't see the screen still? Sorry. People are just complimenting the production value.
I hear there are compliments about the production value. All props go to Maxwell. He is really just good with technology in a way that I'm not and will never be able to do. So shout out to Max, thank you.
Can you see the screen now?
I can see the screen now, but there's a box covering it, displays. Okay, so now we're gonna add the rest of our liquid ingredients. Pumpkin. For those of you who live outside the US, I know there's a lot of you joining, you probably don't have this in your country. This is mostly an American thing, canned pumpkin puree. You can substitute it at home if you buy a pumpkin. You cut it in half or however you want to cut it up. You either roast it in the oven or you steam it. Then when it's cooked and tender, you scoop out the flesh, you puree in a food processor until it's really smooth. But you do need to strain it over a sieve or a colander, whatever you want to call it, because it's quite watery in comparison to this. This is very dense. And if you don't strain it, then you'll add additional water to your bread and it will not only dilute the flavor, but it will also affect the texture. For my American folks who have canned pumpkin, I really like using a conventional, non-organic pumpkin for this because I have tested this recipe and other pumpkin baked goods with organic canned pumpkin. And for some reason, I think it's a little bit more watery and it just results in a different texture. If organic pumpkin puree is what you want to use or that's all you have, make sure you strain it. Again, I think it has more water than the conventional stuff. And so just want to make sure you get the best texture. And you can also, if you wanted to make your pumpkin puree from scratch, you can use a kabocha squash, which would be lovely. Or you could do really any pumpkin variety. If you love buying different pumpkin varieties, you can try that out. And 1 second. Sometimes I just need to make sure that I am in fact doing the recipe in the right steps. Yes, we are right. So we're gonna add a whole can of pumpkin puree. This is a 15-ounce 425-gram can. It's a lot of pumpkin, which means we're gonna have a lot of delicious pumpkin flavor. FF on the chat has a good tip for making your own pumpkin puree. I see someone joining in Australia at 4:18 a.m. I'm very humbled, I guess. Very pleased, very grateful. I don't know what the word is, but thank you for joining so early. I hope you have a nap time built in later. And this is not the same as pumpkin pie filling. So in the US, you'll see, especially around the holidays, pumpkin pie filling in a can. That's already mixed with spices and sugar. That's not what you want. Ideally, your can should just say like pumpkin. Yeah, the one ingredient pumpkin. All right, I think we got most of it. Now we're also gonna add our vegan buttermilk mixture. And 2 more ingredients, maple syrup, just a little bit. I like adding a little bit in addition to the brown sugar for that robust caramelly maple flavor. If you don't have it or don't want to use it, you could just use a little more brown sugar. You need 2 tablespoons. Okay. I'm gonna preheat the oven before I forget. Mortenga has a nice tip. I always freeze leftover canned pumpkin and use it for pancakes, mug cakes, etc. It's nice to have on hand. I love that. Okay, and then vanilla. 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Any vanilla is fine, but for those of you watching who are like baking lovers, I will say that this is phenomenal vanilla, this brand. It is expensive. Vanilla is always expensive, but I have made different things with this and like a grocery store brand vanilla, and this one really makes a difference. So any vanilla is gonna be fine in this recipe, but if you love baking and are kind of someone who enjoys experimenting with different ingredients, this is good stuff. All right, now it's time to mix all this together. A little bit of a squirt splash zone. Oh, it's so pretty. I saw the Donna Jean question. I know they're opening a location in LA for anyone who lives there. That's like my favorite vegan restaurant here in San Diego. It's pizza and pasta. Everything is made in-house. Four Horsemen, Max mentioned, is one of my favorite pizzas. And if they have the cacio e pepe tortellini, so good. Okay, wet ingredients are done. I'm going to set this aside for now. We don't need this for now. Now we will do our dry ingredients. All right, first thing, flour. This is just all-purpose flour. I have not had great results trying to make this particular recipe gluten-free. Gluten-free vegan baking is very hard. But I have a vegan gluten-free kabocha squash banana bread on my blog. So it's pretty similar flavor profile and it's lovely and it is gluten-free. So if you are gluten-free and you really want to make this, I would maybe try that recipe first before attempting to make this gluten-free, just because at least in my experience, this did not come out well. So we need 2 cups of flour. If you don't have a measuring scale, do not do this. Do not just scoop your flour and dump it in there, because you're going to overmeasure your flour. It compacts the flour down. So you end up over measuring. So if a recipe calls for 2 cups of flour, you might actually be adding 2¼ or 2½ cups of flour that way. So instead, you're going to spoon your flour into a cup like so. This is just a half measuring cup for illustration purposes. And then you're going to take a knife and level it off. It's called the spoon and level technique. That's how you measure flour if you don't have a measuring scale. I do. It's so much easier this way. You just dump it in until you get to 250 grams. So I can do the improper technique here because I have a scale to tell me how much I have. All right, a little too much. There we go. Flour is done.
How much flour was there?
This is 250 grams, which is 2 cups of flour. Now we need some baking powder and baking soda. These are our leaveners. They're going to help the cake rise. We need, oops. Need a teaspoon of baking soda. And a half teaspoon of baking powder. Okay, put those to the side. Don't need the scale at the moment. And we need a half teaspoon of sea salt. Again, if you are using aquafaba that's from a can of salted chickpeas, use a little bit of less salt here. And now our spices, which are so important in a pumpkin bread. And I make my own pumpkin spice because it really makes a difference. When you buy a pre-ground pumpkin spice mix at the store, at the grocery store, you're not going to get as much flavor because one, it mixes a bunch of different ground spices. And ground spices, as you might know, they start to lose their freshness and potency once they're ground. It's not that you can't use ground spices. Obviously, I am using ground spices, but when you buy a mix, you have no idea when those spices were ground, when the manufacturer is bottling everything. So you're never going to get a super fresh, flavorful, store-bought pumpkin spice mix unless it's like a really bougie, artisanal, small batch one made by, not the grocery store kind. I've made this pumpkin bread with a store-bought blend and it was nice, but it's so much better with a pumpkin spice that you make at home, and it takes 1 minute. So what I put in there, cinnamon, a generous amount. That's another thing that I think makes this pumpkin bread so fabulous is it does not hold back on the pumpkin spices. Like when I see a recipe that's like 1 teaspoon of pumpkin spice, I'm like, no, we need more. So we need 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon. And then we need a half teaspoon of ground ginger. Also, the other reason I don't like using pumpkin spice blends is because usually people will buy it in September, they'll use it through November, then they'll leave it in the back of the pantry or the back of the spice shelf, and then they'll use it again next year. So like you're really like pushing the limits of the freshness of that pumpkin spice blend. Allspice, we will use a 1/4 teaspoon of that. It smells great. And ground cloves. I think a secret to getting a really flavorful pumpkin baked good is using a little more cloves than you would expect or that is commonly used. So I'm using 3/4 teaspoon, which I think is quite a bit compared to a lot of recipes that will use a 1/4 teaspoon, but it really makes a difference. Also, cloves I think have the highest antioxidant count per like their size. Oh, it's the oven preheating. They're one of the most antioxidant rich foods in the world. So I try to put ground cloves in one of my beverages during the day because it's good. And then nutmeg. So you can use ground nutmeg. I think freshly grated makes a huge difference. So if you can, I would recommend that. It's still going to be good if you don't have it, but if you do. These are actually whole nutmeg pods that my aunt brought back from India. Her family grows them, which is super cool. This is like a hard shell, and then you crack it open, and then you get what you might recognize as like a nutmeg pod. Ooh, Sasha says cardamom might be nice. Absolutely, cardamom would be lovely. Please add a little bit of that if you want. So this is a microplane. This is what I use to grate the nutmeg. You need a 1/2 teaspoon, but I never measure the fresh stuff because it's like kind of annoying. So I'm just gonna eyeball it. Smells so good. I'm really excited. All right, those are our dry ingredients. I'll give that a whisk if I can find my whisk. And this part is important to make sure that the leaveners are well mixed in here, because if you kind of just give it a quick mix, you will end up with pockets of the bread that rise more than the others because you might have a big clump of baking soda in this part and a big clump of baking powder in that area and no baking powder or baking soda in the middle. And for those of you who are just joining, we are making my favorite vegan pumpkin bread. I've already made the liquid mix, which has our canned pumpkin, our brown sugar, our egg substitute, aquafaba, maple syrup, vanilla. And now we are whisking together our dry ingredients. We've got flour, baking powder, baking soda, salt, and our homemade pumpkin spice blend. And Max just popped the recipe in the chat in case you want to look at the exact measurements and steps. All right, this looks about good. Now it's time to combine everything. Just make some space here. One second. Okay. So for the mixing part, we don't want to use the electric mixer. We want to use a lighter touch. So I'm just going to grab, you can use a silicone spatula or a wooden spoon, either one's fine. You don't want like a heavy mixing for this because that can overdevelop the gluten and that will lead to bad things. That will lead to like denser, drier textures. So just all the dry ingredients into the wet. And this is what is referred to as like folding. If you ever see in a recipe, like fold the dry into the wet. It's really this. If you're a Schitt's Creek fan, now you know what folding means. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, just go watch Schitt's Creek because it's a great show. All right, this looks good. It doesn't need to be like so smooth. You don't want it to be smooth. Pumpkin bread is rustic, and you don't want to over mix so much because again, that can cause the gluten to overdevelop. Just fold it in. Yes, I'm sorry. I saw someone comment that, and I just love that scene. Kiri, like Siri says, I made this recipe from you last Thanksgiving and it was everything. Oh, thanks. That's good to know. Okay, so now our pan. This is a pumpkin bread. It's a quick bread. It's a loaf style cake. So this is a loaf pan. A typical loaf pan in the US is 9 by 5 inches. This one is ever so slightly smaller, like 8.5 times 4.5. So we might have a tiny leftover batter, which I'll just like snack on. But the way I lined it with parchment paper so it doesn't stick and it's also easier to pull out. I like to do 2 sheets. You can just do 1, but I like to take something like this and then place it in horizontally like this. And these will be my handles. And then I like to take another sheet like this, like a skinnier one, and just put it in the other way. All right, did not use this, put that away. Okay, this is the part that's a little scary just because I'm always worried I'm gonna spill everything. Sasha asks, can this work as muffins? Yes. I don't know the exact timing off the top of my head, but I know folks have made them into muffins. For muffins, just in general, what I like to do is preheat the oven pretty hot, like 425. Put my muffins in for like 5-6 minutes. Once they start to rise, then I reduce the heat to 350, and that helps get you a higher rising muffin. And generally, I feel like a muffin is going to take between 15 and 22 minutes, but I don't know the exact measure or exact timings for this. In she goes. Bloop. Add some more. You can like almost hear the vinegar reacting with the leaveners. It's like a little bubbly noise. It's really satisfying. And I should mention that like with any baked good in general, not any, with lots of baked goods like this, you don't want to mix your dry and wet ingredients until you're ready to bake it, because for baking powder, it starts, I feel like it's, yes, baking powder, it starts to react when the dry and the wet mix. It also reacts in the oven with the heat, but you don't want to like mix this and then like leave it on your counter for an hour. Like 5 or 10 minutes is fine, but you don't want to like make the batter in advance. And then just, you know, try to get it to the edges, smooth it out. I'm going to use a smaller spatula to have more. So I have more, just it's easier to spread out. Okay, so she is ready. It's a she. Okay. She's gonna go in the oven and just get it even. She's gonna go in the oven, 350 Fahrenheit. I believe that's 175 degrees Celsius. And it's gonna take quite a while, but don't worry because I have something waiting for you. This will take about 55 minutes. I'm gonna set a timer on my phone so I don't forget. I've unplugged my Alexa because every time I try to use her, your Alexa at home goes off. It might take a little bit longer than 55 minutes depending on your home oven. Every home oven is different. I recommend getting a thermometer if you have one, so your oven, you know what temperature it actually is. Oh, here we are. So I did a thing. I already made the pumpkin bread a few days ago so that you wouldn't have to wait, you know, an hour plus for it to come out of the oven. It's like a real TV show where they put the thing in the oven and then magically it's already baked right in front of you. You can call me your vegan Anna Garten if you will. That would make my day, make my year, make my life. So, okay. This is the pumpkin bread. So now we're going to make the frosting. There are two frosting options. There is a maple tahini icing, which is a little bit on the lighter side, and it kind of makes it taste like pumpkin bread meets halva. So if that sounds up your alley, you can find that in the blog post. But today we're gonna make the other option. It's the cream cheese frosting or icing, and it's kind of like a pumpkin spice bread from Starbucks, but like 100 times better. So let me get those ingredients. This to the side. Okay, so vegan cream cheese frosting. You need cream cheese, obviously, vegan cream cheese. This one is from Tofutti. I think it's the one that tastes the most like cream cheese. So I love using it in a recipe like this where you want that cream cheese taste. Another option I really like is Kite Hill Foods. It's a little bit more wholesome. So if that's your thing, it also is very nice. And I need that scale again. This we will need 2 ounces of cream cheese, which is 56 grams. By the way, I forgot to mention you want this to be at room temperature. Mine is almost at room temperature, so maybe we wait a few minutes and answer questions. You can also speed up how quickly this comes to room temperature by cutting this into smaller pieces or chunks. Same thing for the butter, which I'll talk about in a minute. Slightly too much. That's perfect. I was supposed to add the butter first, but I did not. It probably doesn't make a huge difference. And then for the butter, we need 4 tablespoons, which is, I think, also 56 grams. Look at me, a little mathematician. And this is also needs a little bit more time to soften. And again, you can speed up the process by cutting it into smaller pieces. I just had this out since we started in one block because I didn't want it to get too soft. So let's let that hang out for maybe 5-10 minutes and we can answer some questions in the meantime. If you have questions about this specific recipe, great. If you have other questions, I'll take a few of those now and then we'll also do more general questions at the end of like frosting this. Yeah. Ice Wolf says, you've convinced me to actually start using my baking scale. Yes, I'm on a mission. Start a revolution. I mean, it's not like a serious revolution, but it's one that I care about. Meredith asks, is it good without icing? I don't like icing sweetbreads. Absolutely. It is delicious either way. The icings take it more into the dessert territory. I think without the icing, it's more, for me anyways, like a afternoon little treat with maybe some tea. or even breakfast if you want, but it's very delicious without the icing. This is Earth Balance buttery sticks. That's usually my go-to vegan butter because it works so well in baking. It's available everywhere. It's on the more affordable side compared to some of like the more higher end vegan butters. And it works really well, yeah. Random question, have you ever been to Europe? I have. It's, I haven't been to lots of places in Europe, but I've been to France, England. Have I been anywhere else?
Turkey's kind of in Europe.
Turkey. So not to that many places, but I would like to do more.
You've been to Spain too.
Oh, I've been to Spain, yes. I was like, I feel like there's one more country. How would I make this with real pumpkin? So I mentioned earlier, if you want to buy a real pumpkin or a kabocha squash would be a lovely option. You're going to cut it in half, and then I like to brush the flesh with just like the tiniest bit of oil so it stays a little more moist. Sprinkle with just a tiny pinch of salt, that's it. Put it in the oven. I don't know the exact temperature off the top of my head, but if you look at the blog post for this recipe, which is linked in the description box, and Max can post it in the chat again, I do have more full instructions in the frequently asked questions section. You're gonna bake it until it's tender, then you're gonna scoop out the flesh, puree it in a food processor again? I said it twice already. Food processor, puree it in there. Then you're gonna strain it over a fine mesh sieve or something like that because it's gonna be more watery than canned pumpkin. There are, again, written instructions in the blog post. And I just wanna take a second to mention that like for every recipe I share on YouTube, there's always a printable recipe that has even more tips, even more frequently asked questions, even more substitutes than I can even mention in a YouTube video. So please always use that as a resource, not only to print out the recipe, but to not ask questions, but to see if your questions have already been answered, because I spend so many hours working on those posts to try to be as informative as possible. And so I wanna make sure that you have access to all that information and that you know that it exists there. Arnav asks, is going vegan hard for someone who loves dairy-based desserts? I have a big sweet tooth, and in fact had a bigger sweet tooth even before going vegan. So I was able to manage fine because I love baking, and it was kind of fun for me to figure out how to adjust recipes to be vegan. Guessing by your name, I don't know if I'm right, you might be Indian, and I know there are a lot of dairy-heavy desserts in Indian cuisine. I've never been a huge Indian dessert person, so I can't say for sure, but I know that if you Google, there are vegan Indian desserts online that you can search for. But for like a lot of baking recipes, I have found it to be so easy to make them vegan, and they're just as delicious, if not more so. So in general, I find it very easy. Jean asks, can you tell again what the brand is of the cream cheese? It's Tofutti. This is what it looks like. It's like one of the OG vegan brands that's not like come out in the last couple of years. It's been around for a while, and it's really, really similar to cream cheese, traditional cream cheese in taste. Sarah asks, what's one kitchen item you couldn't compromise, like a staple accessory or a favorite one? Oh, just one. My scale. I cannot live without the scale because, again, it's so much easier to measure ingredients, and as a recipe developer, it's so much more accurate to say like, okay, this is 56 grams instead of like a quarter cup, because everyone measures differently and some measuring cups are like slightly different than others. I'd say another one is my food processor because it's so convenient to like make sauces and condiments. And a lot of vegan food is so much better when you have like one or two good condiments, I think. You can make like dinner in 10 minutes if you have a couple condiments in your fridge. And so I use that a lot to streamline things and to make condiments a lot quicker. Lena asks, what would make a good substitute for cashews and dairy type products as I am allergic? It depends on which kind of recipe we're talking about. So if you're making like a savory dish, like a curry, coconut milk is probably your best option. If you are making like a sauce, you have a couple different options depending on like, again, what the end result is. So walnuts can sometimes be used, but they're a little bit earthier and more bitter. So you have to like balance, I guess, or compensate for that with other flavors. Same thing for sunflower seeds. They can sometimes be used, but they have kind of a distinctive flavor. So that works better in recipes where there's a lot of strong or bold flavors. Macadamia nuts can work fairly well. They are obviously more expensive. So it really depends on the recipe. I try to include in my recipes, at least in my recent recipes that require cashews, what a substitute is. Sometimes it's just not going to be the same, and so it's not possible, but I think when it is possible, I do try to provide those substitutes. Yeah.
Is it, you ready?
Oh, let's see if this is ready. Let's get a spoon. Yeah, this is pretty good. All right, so back to the frosting. We've got 4 tablespoons or 56 grams of vegan butter and 2 ounces or 56 grams of vegan cream cheese, and we're going to just whip this until it's kind of like smooth and fluffy and airy. But first, my beaters have pumpkin on them, so let me give them a quick rinse. Okay, let's get started. All right, so I see a question from Roberta that says, I've tried making this at both times. The middle has been raw even after baking an hour and a half. I have an oven thermometer and scale. Sorry to hear that. One possible option that just off the top of my head is that either your baking powder or soda are not fresh, that they maybe have gone bad. If your leaveners have gone bad, it can prevent the bread or any baked good from rising. If you have a scale, you're not mismeasuring anything. Other option again is the pumpkin type you're using. If you're perhaps using organic pumpkin, it might be watery, so we can try straining that instead of just using it straight from the can. Other things, it could just be oven heat circulation. I know you have an oven thermometer. I would recommend putting it in the middle of the oven so you have even heat circulation to ensure that it's baking through. If you saw earlier what the texture, the consistency of the pumpkin bread looked like, it's pretty thick and fluffy, and like it's not like a liquidy cake batter. So if you remember what the batter looked like before and yours was perhaps more watery or thinner, that's probably it. And so if you do make this again, or if anyone's making this and you notice that your batter feels looser or quite wet compared to what you just saw me make, then maybe add a little extra flour, a tablespoon at a time, until the batter starts to like thicken up more. Okay. And then also, yes, I'm going to show you how I test. Let's do that now, actually. When you're testing whether the pumpkin bread is complete, I have a little bit of a trick. Let me grab a toothpick. Okay, so for most baked goods, when you test with a toothpick, I think the standard method is just like go down, like straight down. For a quick bread, no, don't do that, because that's not going to be the best indicator whether the pumpkin bread is done, because it's so tall. Like look how tall this is compared to like a traditional cake in a round cake pan. Instead, you want to take it at an angle and like go like this instead. And that is gonna be a better indicator whether you have like the wet batter. If you have wet batter on your toothpick, put it back in the oven for 5 or 10 minutes. If you are worried that it's already been in the oven for an hour, like is it gonna burn on top, you can loosely tent the pumpkin bread with foil and put it back in. So yeah, don't stick your toothpick down like this, stick it in at an angle, and that will be a good indicator of whether it's done. Someone asked how to test if your baking powder or soda are old. I don't know off the top of my head, but if you Google it, they're like really simple tests you can do, like dissolving it in something and you can tell whether it's fresh or not. Okay, just give this one more mix. Okay. Someone also mentioned I always turn baked goods around halfway through in the oven to ensure even cooking. Yeah, so oftentimes if you rotate the pan like 180 degrees halfway through, that ensures that like every side is being baked fairly evenly. Okay, let's finish the icing. I'm just looking at my recipe because I forgot how much. Okay, so we need some powdered sugar or confectioner sugar, whatever it's called. We need a heaping cup of that. Again, I'm not gonna measure it with cups. I'm going to use my scale, and that is about 135 grams. I'm supposed to sift my sugar, so one sec. So I'm using a strainer or a sieve to sift the sugar, just because powdered sugar can be a little clumpy sometimes. I need more space. I need a bigger kitchen. Help. Everything's fine. Again, you need 135 grams. I'm going to see if I can do this with one hand. This is a big jar. Oh, shit. This is dangerous. One sec. I've already made a big mess. I've got like an industrial sized vat of powdered sugar. So this is why I sift powdered sugar. You can see these little clumps here. Like if you don't sift your powdered sugar, you're gonna get like a lumpy frosting. It's not the end of the world. It'll still taste nice, but you know, if you want like a smooth texture. Let me grab a spoon. Okay. It's so messy. Oh, this is getting out of control. There's powdered sugar everywhere. I regret nothing.
You push it forward a little bit.
Yeah, this is why a scale is so convenient, is that I don't have to like, okay, what's 1 cup and 2 tablespoons of sugar? Now I have to sift it. Like, is that the same amount? This is just so much better. Obviously, I have made a mess, but that's my fault. I'm messy. You may not be messy. And if you want to get rid of some of the clumps, you can just run your spoon back and forth over them. No, apron is an interesting choice. It is, you know, I normally wear one and it's running late today. Didn't think about it. that's enough. Yep, we are good. Set this aside for now. Yes, it is. It's supposed to be fun and messy. You're right. I just personally, when I see a messy workspace, I'm like, oh. Okay, world's cleanest mixing bowl. Ready to go? Okay, what else do we need? We need some vanilla just for a little extra flavor. Half teaspoon of that. Melissa says powdered sugar is the confetti of sugar. Absolutely. When I was 10, when I turned 10, my mom and sister threw me a surprise birthday party, and they thought it would be cute to like put confetti on top of our ceiling fan. So when I walked in, there would just be confetti everywhere, and it was so cool. But then we had confetti in our house for weeks. Okay, a pinch of salt, just, you know, I love a little pinch of salt in savory or in sweet things because the salt actually helps bring out the sweetness, so it tastes more interesting and more sweet in a weird way, even though it's salt. And then the last thing, lemon. So this is gonna be a slightly tangy cream cheese frosting. I love like the tartness that lemon's gonna bring. You just need a half tablespoon, and it's gonna really kind of give you this bright flavor that is, I don't know, it's just delightful. You need a half tablespoon, but I don't feel like measuring it, so I'm just gonna do this and eyeball it, I think. I can taste it and add more later if I want. Okay. Okay, now we're gonna mix everything. Andrea asks, how long have you been vegan? 6 years. 2016 I went vegan. Low speed, so it doesn't go everywhere. All right, let's give it a taste. Oh, it's so good. You should make this frosting year round for any sort of like special occasion cake. It's phenomenal. I love it so much. Okay, so this is the frosting. It's all done. If it's too thick for you, if you want a slightly thinner one, you can always add a little bit of plant-based milk just to like thin it out a bit. I might do that today. It's a little bit thicker than usual. This is like more of a frosting consistency. If you want an icing consistency, you can add, again, this just a small amount of milk. Like really small, start with. Will, guys, Will Young is in the chat. He's the best. I'm sure a lot of you already know him. Giving me a super chat, making me blush. Thank you, Will Young. Oh my gourd, I think Nisha really... He also has great puns, by the way. Thank you, Will. Thank you for the chat, and thanks for being here. Okay, this is all done. Let's get our pumpkin bread over here. Set this aside. All right, guys, time to frost. Really excited. Let me get my frosting spatula though. I love using one of these. This is an offset spatula to frost any sort of cake. You just have a lot of flexibility and it's lovely. And again, the frosting is optional. It like really makes this more of a decadent dessert. So if you want something not as rich, just skip it. Or there's also a maple tahini icing on the blog, a little bit lighter if you prefer that. It's made with maple syrup, tahini, powdered sugar, I think, and maybe maple syrup, maybe not, I'm not sure. It's pretty simple. Look at it. She's so cute. And if you want it to be like extra cute, you can like use the back of your offset spatula to like make little waves. I have not done the best job today because I'm kind of just doing this live and not paying attention to appearances, but it's delicious. So good. Thanks for the super chat, Ice Wolf. Shiba toxic. Okay, one more thing. Oh, there we are. Pumpkin seeds, totally optional, but it's a pumpkin bread, so I like to sprinkle a few on top. And you can do this also with the maple tahini icing instead, or skip them. It's not required at all. Okay, here she is in all her glory. It's time to slice. Okay. Oh no. This will be my snack for later. So this bread has been refrigerated for a few days, so it looks a little bit different than yours would if you took it out of the oven. The frosting is also a little melty, so if that happens to you, you can always refrigerate it for like 10 minutes. But I just will have a bite now. So while you watch me eat pumpkin bread and have my tea, what questions do you have? Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed everything and thanks for being here. I hope you have a lovely weekend. We'll see you in the next video, which will be out next weekend. So see you in a week. Bye-bye.